the only show focused on stars' improvement strategies and the leaders who implement them. This is the Rising Stars with Rex Wallace Show, brought to you by Hyperlift.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another special episode of Rising Stars with Rex Wallace. My name is Luis Cerda, and I'm a star ratings consultant here at Rex Wallace Consulting. Today, we're going to continue the conversation that we started last December about the Spanish-speaking population in the United States, the barriers to access to care that they face, and how that can potentially impact the star rating of health plans which serve this population. Joining me today to continue this conversation are here for the second time, Mark Ureste, Vice President of Business Development at Carenet Health, and for the first time ever, Johanna Martinez. She's the Vice President of Performance Improvement at Prominence Health Plan. Thank you very much to both of you. And let me give you a chance for you to introduce yourself to the audience. Talk a little bit about your positions at work, where your company headquarters are at, and anything else that you want to add at this point. So, Joanna, let's start with you, please.
Perfect. Thank you, Luis. Thank you for the intro. I am Johanna Martinez, Vice President of Performance Improvement, and I work for Prominence Health Plan. We are a plan with about 27,000 lives, Medicare Advantage lives, and we have a presence in Northern Nevada, in the Reno area and the rurals. And also we have a contract in Texas and Florida. So it's perfect for the topic today of our Hispanic population. I am the head of the Risk Adjustment and STARS division. So my responsibility is to make sure that we meet the goals, the performance goals on the appropriate documentation of chronic conditions, as well as all elements of a STAR. So that includes quality, member experience, and Part D. I've been with the company for 4 years, and one thing that I will add is that I am an immigrant. I moved to the U.S. in 2004, so I have probably a little different perspective on some of the items that we're going to cover. So thank you for the invite. I'm very excited about this.
Thank you so much for joining, Joanna. Mark, please.
Yeah, hi, and thanks again for having me again, Luis. It's always a pleasure. Mark Ureste, I'm Vice President of Business Development at Carenet Health, and we provide services to about 50 Medicare Advantage plans, about 150 health plans throughout the country, and really just look at ways that we can engage members of plans, educate them, move them to some type of action, and have always really focused on, we're headquartered in San Antonio, Texas. We've always had a large population of Spanish-speaking users of our services, and it's just kind of a passion of ours to bring health to all, right? And health equity is one of our driving missions, so it fits well in what we do.
Thank you both. Thank you for that. Now, for those of you who are watching this second podcast on the Spanish-speaking population, you might remember that the first time that we did this last December, we focused mostly on language and health literacy. And that is completely obvious. We know that those factors are affecting the Spanish population and their healthcare. Like, do we speak their language? Do they understand what we are telling them? But we need to understand that healthcare is also influenced by culture. So yes, we're not going to be able to take language out of the conversation, but as much as possible, I would like to explore today how culture plays a vital role in making sure that people have access to care and what kind of care they want to receive. And something that I was reading about that is specifically for the Spanish-speaking population, which mostly consists of Latinos and Hispanics here in the United States. But three things that are very important for the Spanish-speaking population is family, religion, and respect. So you can take that, and that's part of our culture. Talking about culture, we're actually recording this session today on the Cinco de Mayo. And something very interesting here is that not everybody, a lot of people may believe that, Cinco de Mayo is Mexican Independence Day. No, Cinco de Mayo is not the Mexican Independence Day. Cinco de Mayo is actually a battle that Mexico won against the French like many years ago, centuries ago. And people still believe and people celebrate that here in the United States as if it's something really big, but nobody in Mexico actually celebrates that. And I am not completely sure if Mexicans find that disrespectful, But it's important that we take those things into account. And again, when we are approaching our Spanish-speaking population, we have to be respectful of their culture. We have to understand what's important to them. So, in that sense, I want to start the conversation by asking both of you, how do you believe that culture affects access to care? And I'm going to let you take a first stab at that question, Johanna, if you might.
Thank you. It has a lot to do with how patients members perceive access to care, pursue care, and how the levels of compliance are. So I will say, I'll give you a couple of examples from my experience is um, most companies, organizations, and I'm going to be very general, health plans or provider groups believe that as long as the person that sees the patient speaks the language, that's enough. So you have, you know, um, uh, uh, mm, probably a white gringo, right, learning Spanish and seeing patients, that's enough because we speak the language, forgetting the context and the cultural, awareness, the frame, the interaction between a provider and a patient. An example is calling people by their first name. A lot of seniors, and I work with seniors, will say that it's very disrespectful to talk to somebody by the first name. So that creates some abrasion starting from the front desk. So if it says, um, "Hi, hola, Joanna, how are you today?" Right? Is Miss Martinez, Mrs. Martinez, right? That's how older people want to be referred. Um, so I think that that creates determining how the trust is built with the provider office, and care. Then another example is if you're talking about controlling diabetes, and the first thing that you tell to probably a person of a Mexican descendant, you need to cut the tortillas. So you can't eat more tortillas, right? That's not realistic, right? You are completely losing the awareness of cultures, like telling a Colombian you can't drink coffee, right? What about instead of five tortillas, eat two, without the salsa on top of cheese? But that's kind of the component, and that creates a lot of I guess is fundamental determine the trust, the adherence to medications, the adherence to preventive services, mammogram, colonoscopy. Um, there's a lot of cultural um, hesitation around mm, colonoscopy for Hispanic men. So how can we navigate around that, and provide better care by being aware of the cultural differences, cultural awareness?
Yeah, completely. And just a comment on that, what you were saying. Yes, respect is very important. And you said something like, if you go and tell a Mexican, like, you need to cut the tortillas, it's not just, I mean, they might find that disrespectful because it might sound stereotypical. Um, and something very interesting with the Spanish speaking population, with the Hispanics, is like they will go to a doctor. And it doesn't matter where this doctor is from. If people don't feel respected, they will not come back to see that doctor. And that's not what we want to promote. What we want to promote is, just like you're saying, a place where they feel respected and where they feel secure. So wanted to throw that in there. So Mark, please, I want to address, I want you to address the same question as well.
Yeah, I think it goes back, and we talked a little bit about this on the last episode, right? It's about understanding, and you can't make the same generalization about the Latino population from a cultural perspective the way you can't do it from a language perspective, right? And I want to go back to your Cinco de Mayo example, right? So there is a huge subcultural variation in the Latino population, meaning people from Puerto Rico, right, culturally are different than people from Mexico, that are different from people from Argentina. And we tend to lump all of these people, these Spanish-speaking people, in one homogeneous group, and they're not. So the first thing to understand is, well, we need to be understanding of the culture, right? We need to understand Cinco de Mayo is not a real holiday. Cinco de Mayo was something that was created by Tecate because it's now like they sell as much beer on Cinco de Mayo as they do Super Bowl, and that's a real statistic. But the reality is that if you had someone of Spanish-speaking origin that came into your clinic and you wished them happy Cinco de Mayo, and they were from Puerto Rico or from the Dominican Republic, they may not even know what you're talking about, right? So you have to understand, as a provider, as a health plan, as someone who's conveying a message, that there's a huge subcultural variation, right? Each one of those has a little bit of a different in variations. There are some things that are the same that we can say, right? But there are variations, and one size doesn't fit all. And you can't say Cinco de Mayo to everyone. In fact, you can't even say Cinco de Mayo in Mexico because hardly anybody celebrates it, right? But it's one of those things to where just understanding that there is a need to understand culture, and just understanding that there are multiple cultures within the Spanish speaking is a great place to start.
And I don't know if health plans, are aware of this. But before, when we were talking about the Spanish-speaking population, um, and you think it's predominantly Hispanics, there were three groups. It was mostly Cubans in Florida, a lot of Puerto Ricans in New York, and Mexicans in Texas and California. But nowadays, there are more Spanish-speaking immigrants here in the United States. There's a lot of people coming from Venezuela. There's a lot of people coming from Colombia nowadays. We have a lot of people coming from Central America, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador. And I have personally met a lot of those people as friends, as colleagues. And yes, we all speak Spanish. Our cultures are similar, but it's not the same. Just like you were saying, we need to start understanding what makes these cultures different. Because again, immigration is real. These people are coming here. They are becoming members of Medicare Advantage, and they are going to be enrolling in your health plans, and they're going to be affecting your stars. If you don't know how to approach these populations respectfully, it's going to be difficult to get them to receive the care that they need. And talking about that, now that now that the final rule from CMS has been released, and we know that the health equity is actually coming from the 2027 stars, as health plans, as vendors, as consultants, we need to start taking a look at this and be really serious about how do we address the different variables that the health equity index is going to be measuring, so we make sure that we are providing what our Spanish speaking population in the United States need. So when we're talking about race, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, the socioeconomic status, geography, preferred language, any of all of these factors, what do you believe we need to start doing to make sure that we are ready for next year? Actually, when CMS will start officially measuring the health equity index. So, what do you believe we should be doing in order to be prepared for that, Johanna?
Well, I think that a lot of health plans are getting ready for this, and it has taken us a long time because it was something that everybody was kind of pushing to the side because there were other things that were coming up, and they were perceived to be more important. I can tell you that the first step seems to be very basic. Um, Cleaning up your membership enrollment demographics. How many of the health plans that we have, default of anything is white, Caucasian in their enrollment, and that's if somebody doesn't give you their race and ethnicity, that's what it is. So you have a bunch of, we had to do a lot of cleanup there and educate our team. So like, what is the difference between race and ethnicity? Right? Why having the language speaking and written is important. And a lot of people think it's just the language that you speak, but what is the language that you mostly speak at home, and what is the language that you're more comfortable having written? Why? Because a lot of senior members actually they leave the marketing material, the education material from the health plan, and give it to their children that probably are born here and they speak English, and it's easy for them to translate it rather than them reading it. We get that a lot with Hispanic population. So I think that's one of the first steps. And I guess as a plan that has membership in both. Areas. So we have in Northern Nevada, mostly white, rare Caucasian members, and then completely opposite, Texas and Florida, a 100% Hispanic. There is nothing south of the border than Laredo and McAllen, where my plan is. Um, if you're incorporated, go there and see your patients, your members. I'll say that the biggest shock for us was pretending that one size fit all. and we promote campaigns and realize that well, how come women are not adherent? How come we having so many people going back to the ER or going back to the hospital? Why people are not, we're doing what we're asking them to do. We're calling them. We're the same people is calling the patients to schedule the mammogram or schedule the hospital follow up. And then when you go back to the market, you realize that, well, these people are not concerned about their mammogram because, by the way, they don't have a permanent resident or they are struggling to put food in the table. When you're creating these fabulous programs like, oh, let's distribute meals post hospital discharge. That's a great idea, right? We are going to support our members. How many of your members, especially dual members, DSM members, don't even have a fridge at home? So the fact that you're sending frozen meals post hospital discharge and these people don't have a fridge, well, that's not very, that requires some awareness, right? So I think from my perspective is, um, your strategies need to be aligned with the reality of your population. So get out of the office and go and see your patients and see where they live. And there is a lot of internal awareness of why collecting data about this is important, about living a situation, or do they live in multi-generational homes or being alone or they don't have a permanent residence. So I think there's a lot of education internally to be able to meet these new requirements.
Mark, is there anything that Joanna mentioned that resonates with you? Anything that sounds like what you're working with your clients?
Yeah, there's a lot there, right? But I think kind of going back, right? One of the things that we have to understand too is when you start looking like at the health equity index and the framework, right? The CMX framework for especially for Medicare Advantage is even though we're talking specifically about Spanish speaking, there are a lot of things within that framework, right? It's more than just looking at someone and the language that they speak. And it's understanding kind of the setting, right? One of the things that Joanna talked about and we talked about before is the importance of having some kind of presence locally, right? So understanding what the population, what is going on in McAllen, Texas versus Laredo, Texas versus Houston, Texas, and then understanding what's going on with the population, right? Interesting fact is that we talk a lot about these things, and I'm in Texas, right? So we talk about like the Rio Grande Valley, and we talk about Laredo and the border being a largely Hispanic speaking area. The reality is that there are more Spanish speakers in Houston than there are along the entire Texas border, right? So understanding one, where are they, and what's the difference between the network, for example, in Houston versus the network in McAllen. It's very easy to find a Spanish-speaking physician in McAllen. It may not be as easy to find a Spanish-speaking physician in Houston, but the reality is that you have more Spanish speakers in Houston than you do in McAllen, right? So there are a lot of nuances within the groups where they're located, and it's incredibly important to understand what the locale is like, what their access is like, understanding kind of what's going on with them, and then almost forgetting everything that you know or that you think you know about addressing this population and looking at it in a whole different way, right? So, for example, there's all kinds of new studies now that say that the use of fotonovelas with the Hispanic population is very, very important and increases, right, the acceptance of materials. So just knowing kind of little things like that, or knowing that Hispanic speakers also, they look at text messages more than English speakers do. And they are, for whatever reason, they're more able to respond to that type of communication. But going and kind of wrapping it with what Joanna was saying was, you got to understand the population. You have to kind of treat them in a whole different new way, and then meet them where they're at, right? And it goes back to that whole, it does us no good to send food to someone who can't store food in their home. It's the same thing. It does us no good to communicate and to create these solutions that people can't use.
Mark, one thing what you just said, it was coming from a different conversation is, when you work with your clients or like health plans, etc. Everybody said, do the piece back and front, like back in Spanish, front in English, because it's easier to distribute. And obviously, from a cost perspective, yes, it's more efficient, but from the communication with your members is like, okay, these people assume that I speak one of those languages, so for by default, the piece works for me. But it's no cater, right? It's no cater to the membership that you're serving. So that's why language is important to collect. So in that's an element of awareness, right? When you have those back and forth pieces, a a lot of plans, a lot of vendors will rely on translation services, right? Somebody that says, translate this thing from English to Spanish and just like send it over. I say that personally, I I review every single piece of marketing material that is in Spanish, because the reality is that the pieces are translated, literally translated. They have no context. They have no element of like, does this make sense for somebody that speak the language? And again, it could be any language. It could be Korean. It could be, any other language that our population speaks. So I think it's important also to have somebody that maybe they're the native speakers of the language to take a look at those pieces and say, does it make sense, right? That this message, even if it's a text message or a piece of material or a video education, a telenovela, doesn't make sense in the language that the patient is speaking.
It's important to understand the journey. Meaning, I mean, you think if I send a notice to someone around the importance of an annual wellness visit, okay, and it's in English and Spanish, and that patient or that member is able to read that in Spanish, but then we give them direction, or the physician that they're trying to make an appointment with does not speak Spanish or does not have appointment scheduling software that also is available in Spanish or doesn't have Spanish speaking or Spanish or tools for a Spanish speaker, right? And we don't understand that we've sent a piece and they were able to take that piece, but we don't really know the entire journey of that individual. So it's also very important to not only understand what the touch points the health plan are supporting, but to also understand then after the health plan touches that individual, what is the physician doing? What is the hospital? What is the health system doing? What is the ecosystem that that person is working within? And how is that supporting its language? And in many cases, we have to support physicians as well as the health plan to make sure that the health plan is communicating in a way that that member understands. But then after we give that member direction, that they're able to be supported by their providers in the language that they want to understand as well. So you have to really understand the entire journey of the member, and then you have to facilitate that and make sure that they're being supported culturally and from a language perspective throughout that journey.
Mark, something that you just said resonated with something that we're doing right now, and is use case managers, social workers. We call it promotoras. Um, eh, Social leaders in the community that support the journey of the patient throughout the healthcare. So, if, for example, a patient needs to be seen for a post-hospital discharge visit, we have people that actually go to their homes and try to get a connection with them. Door hangers, if we can locate them. So I think the work of local resources, local people that know the area, know the culture, can facilitate that. Probably perceive a disconnect between the health plan trying to do something and the provider taking care of the patient, and can help coordinate the care and the needs of the patient. Right? Yes, we want to see the patient every 3 months for their control their diabetes. Well, what about transportation, right? We have patients that they have to drive an hour and a half to be able to see their doctor. So, does the patient have transportation? Do they rely on a family member to do that? So, there's a lot of information that case managers and social workers can collect, or even when you do home visits with nurse practitioners, the nurse practitioner can notice that the patient they have they have something going on in the roof, right? They have respiratory problems, or they don't have a fridge. So I encourage health plans to make the connection with the local community, and use case managers, social workers, community leaders can connect the dots for you that otherwise, as a health plan or even as a primary care provider, you will not be able to see.
I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think both of you mentioned something very interesting, which is that contact with the community. Spanish speaking population, the Hispanic, the Latinos, we are all about the community. And it's true. Here in the United States, that is not very common. Everybody lives in their house and they live isolated, whereas people who are immigrating for one of these Spanish speaking countries, they're used to actually go outside, knock on the door of the neighbor, talk to them. And this is something that I have been telling to our clients. And when I was working at the health plan, whether it's Spanish speaking population, whether it's white, black people, doesn't matter, we have to go out there in the community. If we want to work towards real health equity, we have to go out there in the community. We have to see what is happening. We have to connect people because there's just so much that we can do from behind a desk. And one of the things that I also thinking here as I listen to both of you is, as I mentioned before, some of the things that make the Spanish speaking population who they are. We said family, religion, and respect. And I just kept thinking about that. How are we engaging the family of these patients into complying, into going to the doctor? Because yes, there's people who live alone. There's people, whether by choice or because they don't have any other choice. Um, but a lot of these people live at home with their children, with their grandchildren. They have somebody who's supporting them one way or the other. So I would like you to talk a little bit about what are your plans, or if you're already working towards not just engaging the patient, the member per se, but the family of that person as well. So we can get these people to go see a doctor, to receive the care that they need, and to close those gaps.
Yeah, we are actually doing that with our members through the case managers. Especially if we notice that for hospitals, post-discharge hospital sessions and instructions and follow-up after ER visits, that in some cases the patient doesn't have the phone. It is the wife or the daughter. So we have talked to we're talking to their daughter, we're talking to the mom. In this case, we document that, and it help us coordinate the appointments. So as a plan, there is a lot of work to say how we organize that data that is not dropping a note. Spoke to the wife. The wife is the one that has the phone, right? But we're trying to contact the patient in the other phone that he never uses, right? So we are using those resources, the family member as the connection to get the care that the patient needs. The challenge is, how do you organize the data so everything connects, right? When your quality people are trying to contact the same patient, is speaking to the group that is managing post-hospital discharges, and it's the same people that are managing medication adherence. So how you can centralize everything so everybody has access to the same information. um, and when you made that comment, Luis, made me realize, well, that's a lot of ask, right? As leaders, I have to say, well, we need this and we need it, and this is important, it's stars, and this is important. Everybody thinks that, oh yeah, social awareness, cultural awareness, health equity is important, and but it's money, right? There's investment that need to be put. So as a leader that has to present, we are a business as well, so we have to have a budget and we have to meet budget. I think that if leaders are able to show the value that that can bring to your stars program, um, monetary value, and the satisfaction or retention of your members, you can justify those investments. I can tell you that when I joined Prominence, we were a 2.5 plan in Texas, and we were a 3 in Nevada. No proud of that. And the question was, at some point when Nevada went to 3.5 and Texas was still behind, but we are doing the same thing in this market versus the other. So why are we doing so bad? Um, we didn't have a local office. The people that were answering the phone didn't speak the language. We had no presence in the market. We didn't have an office for people to stop by. So just when we start making those investments of people at the offices, people the patients can come in and speak to somebody about their problems or their questions about medications, that create a change in the perception of the plan from the members. We were able to retain the members and grow the plan. Now we are a 4-star plan in both contracts, but the outcome of that came from investments on the right things that were intended to do the right thing for the member, and then that translates in revenue for the plan. So think about the final goal is doing the right thing for the member. And if we want to invest that and make a difference, you need to show the value of those investments and how that translates into a start improvement, if that's applicable.
Completely agree. And that's probably the reason why all of us join healthcare and why we're working with a health plan, with a vendor, as a consultant, and why we're doing stars, because we want to make sure that we're doing what's right for the members. We want to make sure that they are healthy. We want to make sure that they are satisfied with the services that they are receiving. Sorry, Mike, anything that you wanted to add there?
Oh, I just think just real quickly, right, is we know 48% of Latinos live in 3 generational households, right? So we also know that, 47% live in 2 generational households, and a good portion of them have skipped generations, meaning, a grandparent being raising a grandchild or whatever the case is. We have strategies that we've put in place for many of our clients where, one of the things that we've put out, that we've always made available as part of our advocacy strategy in the Medicare Advantage group, is the ability for any member to reach out to an advocate on behalf of a Medicare Advantage member. And what we find, right, and many times it's children, it's grandchildren that are seeking understanding of, kind of just plan design or how to find a physician, or, we just found out that my grandmother has this, and now, we need to understand what kind of programs are available for her. So I think it's just super important to understand, first of all, just the family makeup, right? And then second, it's incredibly important to understand how those other members in the household can influence, the healthcare decision-making process, and how they can also influence adherence, right? If we can get someone in the household to help us and to make sure, right, that we are communicating and educating everyone in that household as much as we possibly can. So we do have solutions around multiple members and how we help those folks that live with other household members or other family members that are supporting them from a healthcare perspective. And we goes back to what we were talking a little about, and we've kind of mentioned before, right? It's just making sure that everyone is understanding the message and that it's communicated, and that those others that are helping that senior, that Medicare Advantage member, are also aware, and that we're using kind of those same strategies towards the family as well as the member.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. I want you to provide some final thoughts. When you're thinking about the Spanish-speaking population, when you're thinking about stars, when you're thinking about health equity, the many things that we could be talking about, the many things that we need to do. But what are your biggest concerns right now? What would you say?
You made us think here. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, no. One of my concerns is that when you look at, for example, if you look like untreated chronic illnesses, right? Latinos continue to rank very high in untreated chronic illness, and a lot of times we think about things like diabetes, right? My concern a lot of times is that we try for perfect and we ignore the good, right? So I think instead of kind of getting and going in and creating this very complex approach, right? I think a lot of times it's better to step back and just take a very common sense approach and understand, right? If you understand that among the Hispanic population, you have many different subcultures, right? If you understand that, then what you understand is that when you're speaking to Johanna, you're speaking to Johanna, right? And when I'm speaking to Luis, I'm speaking to Luis. And I need to make those messages very personal. And I need to forget the fact, that they both speak Spanish, or they're both from a Caribbean country, or whatever the case is, right? So a lot of times we just need to remember that these are people. They're members. They have needs. They have needs like everyone else. They need access. And the health equity index and that kind of that structure gives us some ideas and gives us an idea of how CMS is going to measure. But I think we shouldn't be afraid to think outside of that framework and think outside of the box, right? And just do some very common sense things that we know how to do, and do just a little bit more and be aware. And I think, for us at Carenet, and I'm just going to just, talk a little bit about Carenet, is one of our missions is better health for all. And when we say better health for all, we're talking about better health for that person that lives in a rural setting, as well as the person who lives in an urban setting, the person who speaks Spanish, as well as the person who speaks Creole, the person who, is a Medicare Advantage member, or a person who is a CHIP population member, right? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're kind of helping everyone, and not get so specialized and so mired in the details, right? That we're just doing the right things. And I congratulate Johanna and her group, because it seems like they're dedicated to doing some good work and doing the right thing. And there is an economic model, right, that shows the wisdom behind it, but it really is just about doing the right thing for the population.
Yes, Mark. I was just thinking, when was it? What are the things that are top of mind? I'm like, okay, there's a lot, right? It's not only um, social factors influencing now this new index and how that impact the math of stars, and what we have to do to ace the exam, right? The reality is that just that will influence every single measure that we are working on, right? And the new measures that are coming into the STARS programs as well. So I think sometimes we lose sight of the goal is not getting to 4.5 or 5 or whatever that number is. Of course, it's important, but the most important thing is that, are we doing the right thing for the members? So what exactly what you said, Mark. And I think this, as long as we keep that in mind, we can actually execute change. The thing that we are more focused right now is how we can go better communicate within the health plan to make sure that we are serving the population more in alignment, right? That we only touch the patient once. That when we touch the patient, we know exactly what the patient needs, and we don't, when they call the plan, the person on the phone knows exactly what that person needs. So you don't say, well, how you didn't show up at your appointment, and you don't know that the patient actually didn't have transportation or is homebound, and you didn't realize that the patient needed a home visit. You should not expect them at the PCP office or your clinic. So it's just connecting the dots right now in our teams, involved, I will say highly involved from the beginning. Your finance team, when you're asking for money, right? Your IT team, the data is important. Your implementations groups, and every single head in the department to make this successful. I think that's my priority right now.
Appreciate that. And honestly, I share both your concerns. And I do believe, and this is something that I try to work with our clients as well, that stars cannot become just checking the box. Stars has to be about making sure that those patients are healthy, that they have access to care, that they're satisfied, and that we understand that here in the United States, we have many, many different cultures that are represented. We have to be sensitive towards all of them, and we have to try to do our best to accommodate, them for the most part. Um, there's again so many things that we could be saying. We could be spending a couple of hours. Unfortunately, time is limited, and we have reached the end of this interaction today. So, Joanna, if the audience wants to reach out to you and they want to talk to you, where can they reach you at?
Find me on LinkedIn, Johanna Martinez. I also invite teams to look at our health plan. We have a webpage, Prominence Health Plan. And thank you again, Luis, for this opportunity.
No, thank you. And Mark, if the audience wants to reach out to you, where can they get a hold of you?
Sure. You can reach out on me on LinkedIn, Mark T. Ureste at Carenet Health, or on the web, which is carenethealth.com.
Thank you so much. Same here. Luis Cerda, I work for Rex Wallace Consulting, so you can check our page, Rex Wallace Consulting LLC, at LinkedIn. Thank you very much to Joanna and Mark. Thank you so much to the audience for listening to this conversation. Hopefully, you're going to find it important and helpful as we do. And we will see you next time and we'll talk again. Thank you so much to everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.